In case you didn't know, there are two testaments in the Bible. You have the Old Testament, you have the New Testament. The Old Testament is before Jesus, and the New Testament starts with Jesus. There's 66 books in the Bible. There's 929 chapters, 31,102 verses, 783,137 words in the Bible. So listen, just in case you ever make it to Jeopardy and those questions are on there and you have a chance to win $400,000, Pastor Trey helped you. Just remember, okay? That's a lot of works to read and remember. But what if I told you that you can learn everything you need to make it to heaven in just 19 words? If the key to knowing God, if the key to knowing God and making it to heaven was just 19 words, would you want to know it, learn it, memorize it, and follow it? We tend to make things really complicated in the church, sometimes even overwhelming. And then we wonder why people don't understand or don't want to come to church or just don't get it. But in the verse that we look at today, Jesus summed up the whole thing in just 19 words. You want to know those words? Okay. We're going to get there in just a minute. I'm not leaving you hanging. I promise we're going to get there. Let me set it up for you first because the context makes the words even more powerful in this setting. We are looking at the last 24 hours of Jesus' life, the most important 24 hours in our faith as Christians. It all started with an event we call the Last Supper, which took place on Jesus' final night with the disciples before his arrest and crucifixion. It was an emotionally charged, action-packed, tension-filled meal. If you weren't here last week, go back and listen online to the start of the story. Jesus humbled himself. Remember we talked about that. And washed the feet of his disciples in a beautiful demonstration of the importance of serving others. When you selflessly serve, you follow the example of Jesus. Never get so impressed with yourself that you become too important to serve. But after washing their feet, Jesus served the disciples what we call communion. Now, I want to switch over to the book of Matthew, chapter 26, and I want to pick up the story. Matthew 26, verse 20, it says, when evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. The setting was not what artists have depicted and we have imagined. This was not a banquet. It was a warm, intimate gathering of close friends. They reclined around a table close to each other, sharing conversation and food. And verse 21 says, and while they were eating, Jesus dropped a bomb. 11 of the disciples had no clue what was coming. But Jesus, he knew what was going to happen. Jesus said, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. One of you is going to hand me over to the people who want to kill me. In verse 22, it says, they were very sad and began to say to him, one after the other, surely not I, Lord. Can you picture the disciples sitting around the table right after Jesus told them one of them was a traitor? They couldn't believe it. One at a time, they asked, not me, right, Jesus? Not me. I couldn't do that. I would never do that. Not me, right? And verse 23 says, Jesus replied, the one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. In other words, Jesus is telling them, guys, it is absolutely one of you sitting at this table with me. Verse 24 says, the Son of Man, one of the titles Jesus used to refer to himself, will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. I'm sure all the disciples agreed with him. You better believe it would be better if he was never born. We might make that happen right now for you, Jesus. They were angry at the thought that one of them would betray Jesus, and not only Jesus, but also the rest of them. In verse 25, it says, then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, surely not I, Rabbi. I don't know why Judas asked the question, but after all his time with Jesus, we assume Judas knew he couldn't fool Jesus, but he asked the question anyways, and Jesus answered, "Yes, it is you." Man. Judas stood up and left the dinner on his way to betray Jesus. The disciples were rocked. The room was filled with emotion, anger, shock, hurt, and outrage. The disciples didn't know what to say or to do. Can you imagine that moment in that night? Over the course of the 3 years, the disciples, they'd become so close as brothers. Jesus had led them, taught them, prepared them to lead. The disciples saw people healed and dead people come back to life. They witnessed blind eyes open and deaf ears hearing. They heard revolutionary teaching. The group had no doubt Jesus was not just a man, but he was who he claimed to be, the Son of God. After all they had been through, how could one of them betray Jesus? Their time together was coming to an end. Difficult times and deep sadness were just ahead. Can you imagine the emotion of the moment? The sting of being betrayed by a close friend and the agony of realizing he had been plotting against Jesus. One season was closing and another new, difficult, trying season was beginning. The disciples would face stress, pressure, persecution, and hardship. You got to remember the setting. Judas just revealed he was the betrayer. What you expect Jesus to say is, "Let me tell you what happens to sorry dogs like you, Judas." I want you to know, and the church for generations to know, traitors will burn in hell, and before they get there, will be miserable on earth. I will make an example of Judas and anyone else who ever decides to betray me or my church. You would expect that's what Jesus would say, but that's not what Jesus said. Instead, Jesus spoke directly to fear and anxiety. Like I said, can you imagine the moment? It's one of the most amazing passages of teaching in the entire Bible if you really think about it. If you're in a place of uncertainty and fear and you aren't sure what is coming next, you will find strength and peace, comfort and hope in Jesus' words right here in John chapter 14, verse 1. He says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going to prepare a place for you." And then in verse 3 he says, "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." Jesus said, "Guys, it's going to be okay. You have to trust me. I'm going before you and I'm going to prepare things. I know it looks like there is no answer and there is no hope, but you have the greatest hope of all, and that's heaven. And I'm going to get it ready. And one day, I will come back and get you so you can be there with me forever." What a moment. That's the promise of heaven. The reason why God sent his one and only Son to earth to save you from an eternity in hell and provide a way for you to spend eternity with him in heaven. Our life approach is different than people who don't know Jesus. They don't have hope after this life. So their complete focus is on, how do I escape this situation? What can I do to make this life better when you don't have the hope that we have in Jesus? But because you have Jesus, you have hope beyond this life. You have a hope eternal, a promise from Jesus. One day he is coming back and you will be with him forever in heaven. I'm afraid we've become a little too comfortable on earth. We've become very comfortable. I've actually had people tell me, "I don't want Jesus to come soon. I've got so much I still want to do." Have you ever heard that before? Have you ever said it before? I know I have. Really? Think about it for just a moment. That big vacation is going to be better than heaven? Getting married, getting your driver's license, all that's going to be better than heaven? Although we don't talk about it enough and sure don't get as excited as we should, heaven is still our hope and will always be our hope. We can endure pressure, hardship, persecution, and stress and still be hope-filled because our hope, you need to hear me this morning, is not in this world. We need to be reminded that our hope is in the next world. It is in heaven, not this one. Even if living for Jesus offered no peace, purpose, or strength for this life, it would all be worth it for the next life. Jesus has gone before us to prepare a place. Jesus said to the disciples, rest easy, guys, relax. I'm just going ahead of you. I'll see you there. And then Jesus said, you know the way to the place where I am going. What was Jesus talking about? Where was he going? How would they get there? What was it, a puzzle? Was there a map? You can imagine the puzzled looks on the disciples' faces. And finally, good old Thomas voiced the question everyone else asks. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? That's the question people still ask. How do we get to heaven? How do we know the way? Virtually every religion seeks to answer that. One thing almost all false religions have in common, do you know what it is? They offer a way to heaven. They offer a way to heaven. Isn't that interesting? They don't invent a new place. They don't deny heaven exists. They take the goal announced by Jesus and try to design a new way to get there. Some teach it by doing good things. If you do good enough, you make it. The problem is no one knows who sets the standard. How much is good enough? What if you fall one good deed short? Dadgummit. How do you know? Some teach you don't have to do anything. Everyone goes. It's just a free ticket. Hop on the train. When you are done with life on this earth, you will start your next life in heaven. Radical extremists think if you kill your enemies, you'll gain entrance into heaven or paradise. One religion teaches that only 144,000 will make it, which is very challenging because they have more followers than that. They don't really say who the 144,000 will be, but you better be really good or somehow earn your way into the elite group allowed to make it to heaven. I don't know how that works there. But when it comes time for a funeral, everyone wants to put their loved one in heaven. Because without heaven, there isn't hope. It's just over. Even if they live totally without God, people start singing songs about heaven. They talk about how nice the person was or how kind they were, how much they loved people, all in an attempt to convince themselves that their family member went to heaven. They don't want to think about the alternative, so they create any path that they can think of. That's why Thomas asked, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? That's the big question. In response, Jesus summed up the gospel in one sentence that no doubt the disciples never forgot. This became the center of the teaching of the church in John 14:6. And it says, Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Boom. Jesus put the stamp on it right there. He put the shovel in the ground. He put the dagger right there. The only hope of being a follower with faith and commitment that lasts is to make Jesus the center and Lord of your life. We must be present present Jesus to a lost and dying world. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the answer this morning, church. What do we need to be telling people about Jesus? The same thing Jesus said about himself. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. We know that Jesus is the way. I'll just tell you, I am famous for getting lost. Even with good directions, I'm capable of getting totally and completely lost. I struggle to follow the directions on my GPS. Just a quick show of hands, who likes to watch where they're going to see, okay, thank you. I don't trust, it's like turn right, turn left. Well, how do I know if it's right here? Or when they say 800 feet, I don't know. I can't calculate 800 feet. 800 feet to me might be that door, might be down the road. I don't know. I like to kind of watch the blue dot as it's moving. Now, I still pay attention. Just trust me, okay? But if I get distracted, I get lost while driving home from church. But I will say I married a really good, like if Jenny and I ever get lost in the woods, she will get us out. I mean, she's like the female Bear Grylls. I mean, she just knows, she's got a great sense of direction, and when it comes to directions, I'm hopeless and clueless. But if you say, Pastor Trey, follow me. Follow me, Pastor Trey. I want to take you to the best restaurant in town. No directions necessary. I will go right in front of you. Just follow me. Listen, no problem. I will stay right on your bumper all the way to the best steakhouse in Jonesboro, okay? I mean, I will follow you. I might not be able to find the way on my own, but I am a great follower. In John chapter 8, Jesus said, Verse 12, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus is the way. When you follow Jesus, you won't make wrong turns, U-turns, or end up on a dead-end street. Instead, you will be blessed on a course headed to heaven. You will be able to overcome the obstacles of life and navigate your way through the twists and turns if you keep your eyes on Jesus. Jesus never said life would be easy. Jesus says, but you got me to help lead you and guide you if you will put your faith and let me be Lord of your life. You know, that old song about keeping your eyes on Jesus is really good theology. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. I mean, that's good theology. So how do you follow Jesus? You've got to read and obey his teaching. You can't pick and choose. You've got to obey it all. And Jesus said in John 12:26, if any of you wants to serve me, then follow me. Then you will be where I am, ready to serve at a moment's notice. The Father will honor and reward anyone who serves me. There's other versions that say, follow me. People show up at church the first time lost. They're looking for direction. They may look like they've got it together, but most of the time, that's not the case. Maybe their marriage is in trouble. Their kids are a mess. Their finances are a wreck. They're fighting addiction. They feel hopeless. They say, we've lost our way. We thought we knew where we were going, but somehow we got off track. We need help. Right then, people need to hear about Jesus. They need to be told Jesus has the answers that they are looking for. They need to be told Jesus battled the same temptations and overcame them. They need to be told Jesus will bear their burdens, forgive their sins, and lead them in a new way of life. It's important to remember our church can help people along the way, but this morning, First NEA, we are not the way. Our church can't save you. No church can save you. Jesus is the way. Our mission is to point people to Jesus, not us. We might be good way pointers, but we are not the way. You may have seen one of these signs. The person holding it may be twirling it around, throwing it in the air. Have you ever seen them? They're doing the the whole, a lot of the tax season people, they got their little dancers out there and they're twirling the signs. I wonder if they go to, is there a college class or something that they go to? Because there's some really good ones. You don't go to the person holding the sign for what you need. All they are doing is pointing you to what you really need. You need to be like the sign twirlers. Understand, you can't give them what they seek, but you can point them to who they need. And that's our job. Jesus said in John 14, verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If your response is, well, I think every religion leads to God, this verse is probably a problem for you. Jesus didn't say that. Jesus said no one comes to the Father except through what? Except through me. If you accept Jesus as the Son of God, this is a non-negotiable. There's no other way. There is not another alternative. If you decide all roads lead to heaven, then you are rejecting Jesus and his teaching. You are deciding he really wasn't the Son of God. Why do people, even good people, want to believe all roads lead to heaven? Because they can't bear the thought of someone they love not making it. So what they do, they rationalize that everyone will, because it's easier to do that. Instead, we should be passionately driven to point people to the way, which is Jesus. John 14:6. Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Well, isn't that too narrow? Too restrictive? It's not restrictive at all. Remember what Jesus said in perhaps the most known Bible verse of all time, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have what? Have everlasting life. Titus chapter 2 verse 11 says, for the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to just the people in the United States? No. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. And that's not just talking about the gender men. That means everyone, male, female, child, adult, whatever you want to say. The message of Jesus is the most, listen to this, the message of Jesus is the most inclusive message of all time. Anyone and everyone is invited. Eternal life can be had by anyone and anywhere. No one is excluded. All you have to do is believe in him, commit your life to him. Even the worst person you know is included in whoever, because Jesus is the way. But what about people born into other cultures? Jesus had a plan for that too. He told us to go and make disciples of all nations in Matthew chapter 28, verse 19. That's why we partner with and we send missionaries around the world, just like we did with Mongolia and our monthly giving to missionaries. Second, people need to know that Jesus is the truth. I wish I could say you would never be lied to at church. That isn't true. In fact, lying is so common among religious people, we have a word for it. I'm sure you've probably heard it. If you haven't, it's the word hypocrite. Lies told in church are especially painful. See, you can handle when a mechanic tries to sell you work you don't need. You don't ever expect politicians to keep all their promises. But when a pastor or TV preacher preaches against sexual sin, even while involved in his own, it is devastating to people's faith. People have become skeptical of the church because highly publicized preacher failures. The list is long and the lies were convincing. Some of you have walked away from the church because of it. Men and women have disappointed you and let you down, but you can rely on Jesus this morning. He is and will always be the truth. In a world full of lies, everyone is searching for the truth. Don't make the mistake of believing that we are the truth. If you do, you will end up very disappointed. We're humans. We can't live up to all that. We'll fail. There's only one person that can live up to that. Only Jesus can live up to that expectation. He and He alone is the truth. He is the way. He is the truth. John 14:6, Jesus answered, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The last point today, Jesus is the life. Maybe you've heard the saying, life begins at 40. Being there now, I can tell you, that's not true at all. There's nothing wonderful about getting old except for the fact that you are closer to heaven. Students think life begins when you get your driver's license or are allowed to date. I remember when me and Jenny went on our first date, 92, white Dodge Caravan, maroon cloth interior. I picked her up when she was 16 because her dad said I could not take her on a date until she turned 16. Come on, dads. Thank you. I think they need to increase that age to 23 now. Took her to her favorite place, the Olive Garden. I remember. I used to be there, students, right there with you. Others think life begins when you get out of school and start making money. When you get married, when you have kids, when the kids are finally out of the house, you think life begins. When you have grandkids, when you get out of debt, when you can afford the boat, the vacation, the clothes you've always wanted, when you build your dream house, when you retire, when your parents can't tell you what to do. Amen. When you finally start your career, life really begins when you realize Jesus is the way and the truth. That's when life really begins for you. There's significance to the order of the words way, truth, and life. Jesus listed life last because you don't get it until you first start following the way and believing the truth. The abundant life Jesus spoke about is the result of steadfastly following the way and sincerely believing the truth. So, if a person doesn't know the way and doesn't believe the truth, he's really not living. You're only existing. If I could have the worship team come. Every day, you see people who have no life. They exist, they have bills, a job, kids, schedules, problems, stress, no life, no energy, no passion. They might put up a good show on Facebook and Instagram, but without Jesus, they will never really have a fulfilled life. Week after week, people who are burned out, stressed out, and worn out come staggering into church. The last thing they need is to be told yet another thing to add to their busy schedule. Instead, they need to be introduced to Jesus. Be a sign twirler this morning. Point others to Jesus and share His love with the lost and the hurting world around you, because He alone is the way, the truth, and the life that you have been looking for. If you're searching for truth, answers, and direction, this is your answer. And we've said it over and over. John 14, verse 6, I am the way, Jesus answered. The truth, Jesus said, and the life, Jesus said. No one comes to the Father except through me.